Today we're going to be making Sichuan Pommes Anna. Now, classically this is made in a pan with layers of potato and butter, but today we're going to be adding my secret spice of Sichuan Seasoning, which is absolutely beautiful. So to make this recipe, all we need is some potatoes. I'm using Albert Bartlett potatoes today, but you can use Maris Pipers and these work just as well. Sichuan seasoning and unsalted butter. That's all you need. So first thing we're going to do is switch the oven on to 180 degrees and then we're going to get on with the recipe. Cool, so next thing that you need to do is take your butter into a pan, onto the heat, low heat, and just gently melt it. Next up, now not all of you will have one of these fancy gadgets. This is a mandolin slicer. So if you don't have one of these, there is two ways of doing this recipe. So I'll show you the first way. First way to do it is take your potatoes. Now if you're not comfortable in slicing potatoes, then what I would suggest is just take a little bit off the bottom just to stop it from moving around on the chopping board. So take a tiny bit off the bottom. Now you can still use that later, but this stops the potato from moving around so much on the board. So what we want to do is try and slice the potato as thinly as possible. Okay, that's how you can do it with a knife. Straightforward, just slice it. Watch your fingers, of course. And then you're going to pop your sliced potatoes into the bowl. Another way of doing it is with the mandolin. So what you want to do with the mandolin is take your potato and gently go down. And then you want to just check it's the right thickness to start with. That's perfect for this case. So all we can do is go straight into the bowl, put your mandolin over the bowl, and then very carefully, watching your fingers, you want to slice the potatoes. Just like that. So I'm going to get on, I'm going to slice all the potatoes before we go on to the next step. Cool, so now we've got our sliced potatoes, we've got our melted butter, which is now ready. Now I'm just going to pop this on a pan so I don't ruin my side. Next thing we need to do is you need some greaseproof paper and you need to line your moulds. Now, I've got these loaf tins, which I think costed me about £3 from Asda. They're great because if you've got two of the same size, you can use one of them to press it, and that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be pressing this terrine overnight so that it compresses. So keep that one to hand. Grab yourself some greaseproof. You want to cut a rectangle of greaseproof out, just a bit bigger than your actual pan. So if you can imagine, it just needs to overlap the edges, like so. Now, really easy way to do this is grab a pair of scissors, put your loaf tin in the centre of the greaseproof paper, and then you want to cut from the corners all the way into the corner of the pan. Do that on each corner. Cool. So you have something like this, and then all you want to do is push it into the pan. And that will stay like that once your potatoes are pressing in there. But what you want to do, hold it down and just tidy up the edges a little bit so you don't have so much overlapping. There you go. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it's going to stop our potatoes sticking from the pan and it's going to sit in there nicely like that. Next we need to do, we need to get our melted butter, our potatoes, and I've got some Sichuan seasoning that I've just put into this little dish because we're going to be sprinkling it in between each layer, and a pastry brush. Lay the potatoes up, so you want to slightly overlap them in the bottom of the tray. Now this does take a little bit of time, but if you're really patient, it'll all be worth it at the end. So, first layer. Okay, so that's the first layer, and then all we're going to do is take some of the melted butter and brush it over the potatoes. So you just want to coat this whole layer with butter, and then we're going to go ahead with the seasoning. Next up, seasoning. Make sure you dry your hands. So have a towel at hand just to make sure they're dry. Otherwise it will get really clumpy and you don't want that. So take your seasoning and sprinkle it evenly between each layer. Now we're going to keep doing this until we use all the potatoes up. So it could be 8 layers, it could be 9 layers. Depends how thick you've cut your potatoes. Ideally you want them to be quite thin. Okay. So you want it coated, completely coated with the seasoning. Now the seasoning has just under 50% salt in it. So if you imagine if you're seasoning something normally, how much salt you put on. So you want to kind of double that. So because this has got lots of different spices in the mix, it's going to bring out all the bold aromatic flavours. When you cut the Pommes Anna, it's going to have all those layers of this Sichuan seasoning. So I'm going to carry on layering up my Pommes Anna. On the last layer of the Pommes Anna, don't put any seasoning on the top. So I've layered up my potatoes with the butter and the Sichuan seasoning. Obviously the top layer I've just left it without the seasoning and brushed it with the butter. Okay, that's going to stop it from burning. The oven's been preheated and all it needs to do now is put it into the oven for 50 minutes, 50. Then we're going to check it with a fork. Obviously, if it's not quite cooked, because understandably everyone's oven's slightly different, we'll prod it with a fork to check if it's cooked. If it's not cooked, we'll just pop it back in the oven for another 5 to 10 minutes. So we're going to go 50 minutes and see how we get on. So the Pommes Anna's been in the oven now for 50 minutes, so I'm going to just check it and see if it's ready. Now, halfway through cooking, checked this just to make sure that it wasn't burning because everyone's oven is different, right? So mine can be a bit temperamental sometimes. So all I did halfway through the cooking process is just patted down the potatoes slightly, just so they're nice and flat. When they continue cooking, it will be lovely and compressed. So I'm going to check this now to see if it's ready. Now, the fork should go through, but should still be slightly firm. If you overcook your potatoes, you will just end up with a tray of mash. 50 minutes works perfectly for this recipe, but if your tray is bigger in size, you might not need to cook it as long. So bear that in mind when you're doing it, and obviously the quantity of potatoes that you do, if you're doubling the batch, it will take longer. So try and do it this way if you can. If you need to, add on a bit of time at the end, that's absolutely fine. Now it's ready. The next thing we need to do, we need to take a piece of greaseproof paper, pop it into our tray, okay? Before you do this, leave it for about 15 minutes or so, just to cool it down a little bit. Then pop your greaseproof paper in. Then you want to take your other tray, pop it on top, and then grab some tins out of the cupboard, whatever you've got is fine obviously. Pop them into the tray, and then you want to pop that into the fridge overnight. Ideally it needs a minimum of 12 hours. This will just make sure that it's completely compressed. So when you go to slice it, it'll be really lovely and firm and you'll get these lovely little bites of potato. That's what you want ideally. If you're in a rush, obviously, you don't need to do this. This is very chefy. If you want to go ahead straight away and just dig in and grab some potatoes, you can do that also. But I think this is better. So pop that in the fridge overnight and then it's ready. This is a Pommes Anna that I made yesterday. It's been pressing in the fridge overnight for 12 hours. So here's one I made earlier if you like. I'm going to remove the greaseproof paper and we're going to pop it onto our chopping board. Okay, now what you want to do is you want to slice it into nice little blocks. So it's going to be a nice block of potato rather than the classic Pommes Anna where it's just flat and crispy. We are going to crisp this up back in the oven and it's going to be lovely. It's really, really lovely, served with anything really. Like we usually serve it with beef. So we do a rolled beef and then we serve it with this and it just tastes divine. So it really is a recipe to impress your guests. So we're going to portion it very chefy today. So there are going to be a few scrap pieces which we can put to the side, which makes a lovely salad at a later date. So we're just going to portion it so it's nice nice rectangle pieces. So take the end off first. Keep all your little bits in a bowl so you can use that at another day. And then I'm going to cut them into nice big rectangles. If you want to get really chefy, you can measure them with a measuring tape. But to be honest with you, you can do it by eye, by just cutting the first one, taking it on top of your Pommes Anna. If you want it exactly the same size, cut like that. Very easy. Okay, so next up, if you want to go that extra mile to make them look really, really nice, all you can do is take a little tiny bit off the ends, and all that will do is just square it up slightly. Obviously, this is classically something that we would do in kitchens, and all of these trimmings wouldn't go to waste. They would just end up being our star food. So if you want to do that at home, you can. It just gives you that perfect slice of potato. Obviously, it's not completely necessary to do that, but we're going to do it today because the presentation is key. This recipe typically serves 8 people. If you want to make it for more people, just double the recipe. Take a tray and a bit of greaseproof paper and just lay out your lovely portioned potato onto the tray. Okay, just like that. And then we're going to pop them in the oven and we're going to heat them until they're really lovely and crispy on the outside. Now, usually it will take about 25 to 30 minutes, but we can check them. We're going to do that at 180 degrees. So our Pommes Anna's been in the oven now for 30 minutes, so we're going to check it. It should be ready. So what you're looking for is nice crispy potatoes. So you want the outside to be nice and crispy, but you don't want to leave them in the oven too long because if you do, they will just go soggy and mushy. So these are perfect. Usually I would serve these potatoes with a protein. So as I was talking about earlier, I was talking about beef. So I slow cook blade of beef and then I pick it down, roll it, and I serve it with this potato and a dash of sauce. So we're focusing on those kind of flavours where you can expect really bold, punchy flavours. And then of course you can serve it with some kind of side of veg. And if you want to get really fancy, you can add in my chilli emulsion as well. So for the purpose of today, we're just going to serve them as a side. And we're going to take a spatula and simply just place them onto this gorgeous plate. And we're going to call it a day in the kitchen. And so I'm going to enjoy these later on with my dinner. So guys, don't forget to like this video, share it, put a comment in if you like as well. And I can't wait to see your creations at home.